Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. We're very pleased to have you at yet another session of Discovery. Thanks for being here. My name is Emily Grenier, and I am the Engagement Manager at Efficiency Canada. Efficiency Canada operates within Carleton University, and we acknowledge that the location of our campus sits on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. In doing so, we acknowledge we have a responsibility to the Algonquin people and a responsibility to adhere to Algonquin cultural protocols. So I'm pleased to welcome our guest today. Liam Cook is the Director of Business Development and Innovation with Thinkwell Shift. Liam will share how they have been helping local brick and mortar businesses uncover 10 to 20% energy bill savings through hands-on workshops and what lessons they've learned along the way. Liam, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. So welcome, everybody. Thank you, Efficiency Canada, for having us here and the ability to present on what we've been doing in Nova Scotia with Get to Zero. Today's presentation, as Emily mentioned, is really looking at the small investments that businesses and business owners can be making into their facilities to get some really good energy savings out of those properties at the end of the day. For anyone that doesn't know me, I've been in the energy efficiency sector here in Nova Scotia for about 12 years. I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of great projects. I'm a certified energy manager, lead AP, and right now work with Thinkwell Shift, really helping out on that business development side of things, but also as instructor for Get to Zero. So these workshops we've been helping small business owners with. So for those that aren't aware of us, we are a Halifax-based behavior change company, really focused on helping people make good, sustainable choices. Typically, we're working with utilities, municipalities on providing boots on the ground engagement, as well as program delivery. So we would have been back here close to 2 years ago, presenting on a program that we deliver on behalf of Efficiency Nova Scotia, which is called Green Schools Nova Scotia, where we get to see about 30,000 students every year and engage them in person or virtually on climate change, sustainability, and tying that all back to energy efficiency. We joke around, but basically what we pegged ourselves back to is really that human factor, that engagement one-on-one really well with end occupants of energy use or environmental initiatives. So we do follow a behavior change framework, which is our understanding where people are at today, so that we can better help engage, provide that tailored message that's going to work with them to move them forward to where they should be tomorrow, and then hold their hand, guide them on what those solutions and next actions are going to be for them. So just as a quick reminder for everyone on this call, reminder for myself, while Canada is just a drop in the bucket of all global emissions, it's always good to remember that we're number 2, just behind a few Middle Eastern countries when it comes to per capita emissions. And that's really my driving force as to why I show up, why I do this day in, day out. Well, although our consumption isn't as high as a lot of other nations, as a developed nation, it's definitely our responsibility to show up, to lead the way, and really lead by example in reducing all of our own individual carbon footprints. Now, we know that transition to low carbon future is just a matter of time for a lot of businesses. I look to our folks and friends over at the City of Halifax that just recently came away with the top prize at the Clean 50 Leadership Awards for their Halifax climate plan. Basically, how are we going to tackle this climate crisis in the city of Halifax? That plan extends nicely to the rest of Nova Scotia as well. But the plan forward over the next 30 years, as will be with many provinces, many jurisdictions, is going to be finding elimination of energy waste through our existing buildings that we already have. So for the next 30 years, Halifax is really focused on decarbonization and then making that transition over to electrification and renewable energy. So that's where we've really decided to focus our efforts. Many on this call would be familiar with the energy pyramid, the basics of energy conservation, our decarbonization journey, and where that leads us, especially when we're looking at a return on investment. But for those that aren't familiar with the energy pyramid, basically that foundation is an understanding. How do we actually use the energy that we need in the day-to-day lives? Second of all would be, are there habits that we can form? Are we just wasting energy to begin with? And can we turn the tap off on some of that energy that we use? Energy efficiency would be that next step. Obviously insulating our buildings, putting in better controls, better systems in general, and anything that we can't create or form a habit with, change our behaviors on. There's typically a technology that'll do it for us. So those are all those efficiency measures. Then we step up to renewable energy, anything that we can. After we've reduced as much as we could, Obviously, we want to electrify and then transition as much as possible to renewable energy forms, and then definitely see carbon offsets, renewable energy credits as being a requirement to get to net zero at some point in the future, but there's very low return on investment other than potentially marketing initiatives for businesses that are looking to do that. You would want to follow that pyramid up to the top to get you the best return on your time, return on your capital investments. So where Thinkwell Shift plays is right on that understanding line, the conservation line, and into the energy efficiency measures, but we typically aren't doing deep energy retrofits for any buildings. So during the pandemic, our team got together and really asked ourselves, how could we be helping more of the small business communities that have had to close up their doors, shut down for a long period of time? We're a small business ourselves. We've got a lot of people that have entrepreneurial mindsets and want to think or try to think like small business owners. And with nearly half of Canadian businesses being of that 1 to 20 staff size, a lot of them are being overlooked by the big market players that may have energy service contract options. If you spend over $500,000 on your energy consumption, there may be great efficiency programs, but do we have the expertise, the skills to dive into them? Most of those businesses don't have an individual that knows the solution in-house, and they're really missing that expertise. So unless they're deeply passionate about it, it's typically an oversight they see. We also know that a lot of them don't have the investment capital. They're constrained by capital investments and operating budgets, and we know that they've got a good chunk of time where their businesses aren't even in use. We went in to Get to Zero, creating the idea, the concept with those bits in mind. And as we went along, we also find out that because there's fewer staff, fewer people, there's constraints on time, there's constraints on their attention that they can give us. They've got a million and one other things happening in their business. Energy use is typically near the bottom if thought about at all. And ultimately, we find that we're competing for the staff and resource capacity that they have. Now, our friends over at the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Energy and Energy Star tell us that businesses could be saving up to 30% with no cost or very low cost investments up front. When we bring that closer to home here in Nova Scotia, because our electricity generation still is over 50% coming from coal-fired generators, finding a business owner basically $1 a day in reduced utility costs would be the same as having a cafe owner get 30 of its customers to come in with that reusable coffee mug 365 days a year. So we know that we can really hone our efforts into things that are going to be those quick cost-saving initiatives that actually stack up to be a pretty reasonable environmental impact as well. So we talked about what a Get to Zero pilot idea could look like. And really at the end of the day, we landed on a hands-on training workshop dedicated and specialized for those business owners and folks in the business community that wouldn't impact their day-to-day operations or the customer experience or the product quality of what their customers get. We wanted to help them understand, identify, and eliminate emissions. Again, focusing on that bottom half of the energy pyramid. And while we thought, hey, 30% would be amazing, if we can help those organizations, businesses find a 10 to 20% reduction with very low upfront capital cost, we'd be happy. Really, we wanted to identify those businesses that hadn't really started a journey towards net zero and how we could hit them up with fundamentals, get them bought into the idea of energy conservation, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and then basically hand them off to the programs that we have in Nova Scotia that are dedicated to the deeper energy retrofit. So we put together a quick proposal, got a bit of funding through a contribution agreement, so 75% of our project costs covered by the Government of Nova Scotia's Low Carbon Community Fund, so that we could completely subsidize the cost of that training with small business owners. The Get to Zero workshops are basically a 3-part component, with the first training session being 2 hours where we help those owners and participants understand the impact of resource waste with a focus on energy use. We help them with a few hands-on exercises, actually visualize where's their energy coming from? Is it the power company? Is it, we've got a lot of oil in the province, obviously propane, natural gas, basically who's filling that bucket for their organization? Where are the leaks or those inefficiencies? And is there any energy that's passed on that the consumer has to think about? So we worked with a brewery, and that was one where a customer doesn't necessarily need to put their beer directly into a beer fridge as soon as they get home. They need to cool down before they want to drink it. And so there was a little bit of that energy left over that if they want to own that, they can message around it. And then finally, on the first session is walking away with an effort impact grid and saying, what are those things that take me very little effort, but would have a higher impact at the end of the day that I can do over a 2 to 3 week period before we meet back with the rest of the group for the second session. And I can talk about what we found, what was a challenge to do, and where we succeeded. We then schedule a one-on-one facility walkthrough with each business, basically so that they can have a second set of eyes, someone there to peek in, look for those opportunities that they're not experts on, and again, help them find additional quick wins that might not have been captured on our first training session. On session 2, it's a little mean and a little bit of a trick, but going into it as a behavior change company, we know that 70% of all change efforts in a company are doomed to fail. A lot of the times the participants come back with what they thought were going to be really quick, easy wins to do in 2 to 3 weeks, and they've done none of them. They've maybe gotten one of them. The keeners get 2 or 3 because they put it as a priority. But we know that there's more opportunities than just the quick wins that we walked away from. So that's when we help them identify what their commitments are going to be, help them actually quantify what some of the project costs and their saving opportunities will be for them, and then put together the implementation plan so that they can succeed. We also help them develop communication strategies so that they can bring it to their staff. Ultimately, we talk about those deeper energy retrofits for those that are really interested in doing more, but don't necessarily have the capital support or the expertise to do. That's when we're typically leading them and directing them to other resources and program supports that are able to help. So I wanted to share basically the top 3 things, or the top 3 commonalities that we found across all of our businesses that really had a low cost or no cost solution. So solutions under $500, quite simply. As many of you would know, HVAC Setpoints and controls are a huge contributor to our energy consumption. For a lot of businesses, their heating load's looking at about 50% or more of the energy that they consume. And we found a lot of the non-programmable thermostats in those buildings, but then we also found some great programmable and smart thermostats, which either coming out of the pandemic and getting back to either standard, typically newer operating times, none of those controls were actually optimized with proper set points anymore, nor were they the relevant hours that staff were actually coming. And so it was 1, helping them optimize those systems again, and 2, helping with the habits and behaviors to actually get proper turn downs on their thermostats at the end of the day. Again, no brainer at the lighting side of things. As efficiency professionals, as people in this business, we see it every day. For the average individual just walking down the street, let alone business owner, it's just commonplace. So it's the lights that are on unnecessarily. It's daylight, you're still running them an extra 12 hours more than you need to be running them. In some cases, it's bulbs on a switch that are just on for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even though the switch is in an easily accessible point for staff and employees. And exit sign bulbs, we've seen programs that had actually addressed incandescent exit lights with LEDs. And it seems like after those bulbs burn out, the business owners just go back because they never had a capital replacement plan. So they go back to finding the incandescent version because that's the cheapest one, easily available at the local hardware store for them to swap back out. And we know they run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Each exit sign here in Nova Scotia could save $40 a year just to swap from incandescent back over to LED for about a $12 upfront cost for those bulbs. Again, no surprise, hot water losses are a big contributor to that overall energy bill. And again, every business that we're going into has uninsulated domestic hot water piping. In the areas that are chosen here, there's spaces that are either unheated spaces, there's spaces that actually have temperature control because they're process loads. And in one case, we've got steam coming up through some of these pipelines, again, being completely uninsulated. For the few kitchens that we did get into, obviously we know that the high efficiency spray valve alternative is out there. But again, business owners are unaware of that, and basically when they bought that location, bought the product, they never thought of what my water consumption in general could be. So those were the top 3, but because Halloween's right around the corner, all of us are familiar also with phantom loads. You all know them here. The one great story that I have that was the takeaway on the top left there with the coffee maker. This was being left on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to have water kept at 205 degrees, simply so that staff could have hot water for their tea 3 times a day. So quickly had that unplugged, sold off to someone that would use it properly, and replaced with a kettle. Our experience was that we were going into it not knowing what measures, what opportunities were going to be there for small business owners, and actually left seeing that there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit in that market. Of the participants that we had, it was varying ranges of what their energy costs were on an annual basis, as low as $1,500 a year, just operating seasonally and basically only being billed for their lighting bill at the end of the day, right up to $80,000. That's a 200-year-old property that's got oil, electricity, heating systems, and was a lot to get through, but found some great opportunities in it. For everyone that participated in the programs, we're able to find at least a 10% reduction in energy use, with a lot of them coming close, if not over that 20% mark. And again, that was through the behaviors that they put in place, putting checklists together for staff that are closing down the shop at the end of the day, or identifying the control systems that would have to be installed in order for them to automate those processes for them. And a lot of the times when we are recommending the control side of things, those business owners can access Efficiency Nova Scotia programs and get some incentives back. We learned that when we were selling the workshops and talking with people that actually showed up, the cost of operations, the cost of energy was their number one reason to do. And then the feel good part of actually doing something good for the environment was really number two at the end of the day. We had a lot of success bringing qualified opportunities over to Efficiency Nova Scotia's small business programs. So Nova Scotia, we've got a lot of point of sale programs, but also programming that can help individuals really get very high incentives on the work that they're doing, but also help them out with a free energy assessment and hold their hand into what some of that work could look like for deeper energy measures. Coming out of it, I think there's a great opportunity for this type of workshop to be leveraged as either a B2B sales opportunity where you're providing those workshops free of charge, and then finding all these great opportunities that your organization can have solutions for, or secondly, a program lead generation, whether that's from the utility or municipal front. Our biggest hurdle after the upfront cost to attend a workshop, by having that subsidized, we were able to knock down one great barrier. The second one that we still face is with limited staff capacity, our workshops asking 8 hours from staff members to come through a workshop, give us time to walk through their business, even if it's on off hours, is really what we're competing against at the end of the day. And then finally, we thought we had a good solid plan of measuring and verifying what the energy savings were going to be by getting each of these businesses up and registered for portfolio manager. Again, portfolio manager is an additional step, an additional requirement, something else that's competing for a business owner's time that for them, they don't see a lot of benefit in putting that monthly or bi-monthly data. So potentially an opportunity to do that on their behalf, or we're just now getting real-time energy metering here in Nova Scotia, and so ability to track bills that way rather than waiting for a month or two out.
Thank you, Liam.
Yeah.
That was very interesting. I certainly learned a lot. Angie is asking, you mentioned this a bit in the last slide, but how has the uptake been? You did mention that the main reason some folks weren't participating was because of the time commitment, but do you have anything to add on that?
I can address that directly. The uptake has been not what we wanted or initially thought it was going to be, and that's where those challenges, barriers come to play. We've been finding a lot more success and opportunities quite recently working with local business development commissions and finding more community champions that now that they've actually seen that there's several case studies, let's say, of organizations that were willing to give us their time in that pilot and are now seeing the savings. We're getting a lot more of that supporter opportunities to go out, provide a quick webinar, provide a lunch and learn session for our business community. And so over the past month or so, we've seen interest and applications increase, but we know that we still fight exactly for that, putting the time aside. So it's what we've done to adapt it. We initially started with 2 4-hour training sessions plus the facility walkthrough. We've dropped the training sessions down to 2 hours to focus solely on energy use. We used to focus on energy, water, solid waste, but most of that savings comes from the energy side of things. So that's where we've put our focus. It's now 2 hours for the first and second day sessions. And then the walkthrough can be either during times that they're already operating with limited impact to their business or on the back end when they're closed up.
Awesome. Do you have ongoing funding to continue this program? You did mention you got some.
Yeah, so we got that funding contribution for the province. That's going to wrap up at the end of this year. We're just underway with a town locally here in Nova Scotia that's very focused on climate change. They've got a very strong climate change plan and initiative. So they're a small university town. They have structures for their university, their transportation sector, residential emissions, but commercial emissions are almost 30% for the town. And they're looking for ways that they can basically get business owners invested and interested. So we're going to be working with that town where they will be able to subsidize the training for businesses that are within their own geographical cutoffs. I think we'll continue to see what's available both at the provincial and utility scale side of things, but that was very cool to see a town coming up to play and say, yeah, our business community wants this, where a town is naturally invested in keeping as many small businesses in their proximity as possible. So it's one additional benefit or competitive advantage they have over the town down the road.
And how is the utility involved, if at all?
So the utility hasn't been directly involved or engaged in the program design implementation. Where they're heavily involved is in the handoff. And so we have a great relationship delivering programs on behalf of the utility. We've got a lot of trust built with the utility. So when we bring them one of these businesses and have them basically vetted and put in the correct lane, they know exactly what programs they're eligible for. They know that the groundwork and foundation's been done, that those businesses are interested and are more likely to succeed. We've had a lot of success there with the handover to, say, the efficiency programs or rebate programs.
And so Jessica is asking, are there any plans or programs for businesses that might want to go beyond these low or no cost actions?
Yeah, in Atlantic Canada, those are the jurisdictions I'm most familiar with. And so Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Newfoundland all have rebate programs available for businesses. Province next door, they can get about 25 to 30% of those energy efficiency retrofit costs covered. The rebate programs differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, so the level of funding there is probably the biggest differentiator. Here in Nova Scotia, you can get, typically it's 60%. Right now, it's up to 80% of those costs covered for small businesses, and that's $42,000 a year or less spend on electricity, makes them eligible for those programs.
And Trevor is asking, is phantom load from computers or monitors a big deal now with modern equipment?
Yes and no. I was amazed by the relics and ancient technology that's still being used by a lot of our small business community. You get in there and they haven't replaced computer equipment for 15 plus years. And while that's one component of it, definitely making sure that they're using energy conservation features that may or may not be built into those. The bigger factor was we've got monitors, computer towers that are still running idle 24 hours a day in a lot of these businesses, knowing that they could easily be shut off when you've got people that are coming in for 8 at most kind of 12-hour shifts. You can still find that 50% energy savings at a minimum just by having those systems properly set to sleep standards, but also fully turned off. But it's not a huge component of their overall energy use.
What was your approach to getting businesses to participate, like on the promotion side or the marketing side of the program?
Yeah, we were initially basically reaching out to our friends in the business community, seeing which of those would be interested. That initial test group was definitely the ones that were environmentally conscious. They were also a little bit tougher because they'd already taken a lot of steps to move forward. And so to reduce their carbon footprint, instead of move forward, they've taken steps already to reduce their carbon footprint. The biggest savings come from those organizations that haven't. And we found that a lot of our marketing promotion materials talk more about the energy waste in their business, the money that they can get back from operating costs. We don't typically use the word save in our marketing materials because I think 50% of us are saying that we've got the right amount of money set aside for retirement, or other 50% of us don't. 30% of us don't have any retirement savings. So Canada isn't a nation of savers. It's very much reducing waste, reducing operating costs through the business. And so that would be with social media promotions, cold calling through and through. And then, as I mentioned, we've had a lot more success and buy-in by getting people in their business community that they trust.
Awesome. Jonathan is asking if you're open to working in Ontario with those municipalities, and are you using open data to measure GHG reductions?
Yeah, I think we could talk about Ontario municipalities. I would definitely love the conversation, love the call, just to explore what that could look like and see where it goes from there. So we haven't been doing open source, and there's a couple reasons why, but basically the biggest one and the biggest barrier that we've had even just using Energy Star to begin with is Nova Scotia doesn't have an easy green button system where you can just say, yes, utility, upload all of my consumption data for me into Portfolio. So it's still hard coding or getting a download aggregate of all the utility bills and all the utility costs. As well, the majority of the businesses that participate are still on oil records. And so from business to business that's doing that oil delivery for you, some of them have done good at digitizing those records. Some of them are still basically chicken scratch invoices and bills that we've delivered 1,000 liters of oil to your property. Here's the bill for it. So long way to say it's another burden that right now we feel would be put on the business owner. The business owners have told us that they're not going to bother taking the time to do portfolio manager. But if and when we do have an easy green button feature to do so, I think that's when you'd see a lot more success.
So I guess about that, how have you been asking participants to track the data?
So we do set them up basically just to give them that baseline on portfolio manager. And if they want to use portfolio manager, we also enter into an agreement that when they sign up to and register to participate in Get to Zero, that they're willing to share with us access to all of their energy billing information, both historical, minimum 12 months in the past, and then also into the future, another 12 months. So we have access to actually track it. Where we're talking 10 to 20% savings, I think we'll probably be able to say that, yes, that was there, unless they did additional efficiency measures. And that's where the verification becomes a bit more muddy. If we were there months 1 and 2, and then they do a deep energy retrofit through an efficiency program, differentiating those two savings is where I think it's going to get tricky to do the energy.
Richard is asking, which mechanisms do you recommend for bridging the gap between best case operations and actual net zero?
Yeah, and I think everybody uses energy differently, and the solutions are different from business to business. I do think that energy pyramid shows the fundamentals for any business, any homeowner, any town, municipality, you name it, to move in that direction. And so first and foremost, we're all experts on energy efficiency. That's why we attend these calls. We have to remember that 99% of the population is not. And so the more that we can build up those fundamentals for them and basically hand in hand hold them through what that journey could look like is where we're going to get the best results moving towards net zero and how we bridge that gap. And then I would definitely say it goes, what we do in the school system is, I think, create that next generation of individuals that are focused on energy conservation, know more about energy efficiency than I did growing up. From there, each business is different, but it's basically how do you invest and get people to make the investment necessary, whether that's through incentives or nice little carrot or a stick, which is the carbon price and carbon tax scenarios, to get them to consume less and invest more in energy efficiency, electrification, renewable energy adoption. You do as much as you can either on site or through your individual grids. And then personally, I would say your renewable energy credits or carbon credits would be the last thing that we should basically put our money to. They're relevant, they're very good for what they do, but you get better return on your investment for all those other areas as far as money back into the actual energy consumer's pocket. Jesse Rose got a good question. Could it fit within a utility program portfolio based on the energy savings generated? And I think it could if we had a great way to measure it on the back end. And I think that's where we typically come to, Jesse, when it comes to behavior change savings, right? Is can we do enough for utility? And ultimately, it's us looking at behavior change, working on that human factor. In my world for the past 10 years, there seems to be a disconnect between behavior change savings and an engineer's evaluation of energy savings at the end of the day. They love the technology, they love the product, that when you swap it out 1 for 1, you get a guaranteed savings. We know behavior change programs work. We know that they work in a lot of other areas outside of utility programs. It's just, can we defend those savings to an evaluator or a regulator at the end of the day? And I think there's a lot of money, time, effort going into that. And then does it pass the cost effectiveness test by itself? It definitely passes 1 year cost effectiveness testing on its own. Where we followed is how long does behavior change savings persist? I guess my argument would be after they go through the workshops such as Get to Zero and they are directed to deeper energy retrofits, how much longer would it take in that business to actually move and implement some of those other opportunities? And I think we're looking at more than 12 months for someone else to come in there and give them a shake with the fundamentals and see what else they could be doing.
Trevor is asking, when it comes to making sure new workplace practices stick, what do you find find works well for communicating to staff?
Yeah, it's all about how you lead that change. So most of us humans hate new changes, hate different ways to do things. And that's where a lot of that day two piece comes into play, is that when it comes to making something stick, there's probably 7 key areas to look for. I would say the top 3 or 4 of those would be: name the individual that's responsible, that's going to be held accountable to it. Because when they walk away on the first day, no one's held accountable to it. If they had a champion, that's when they see the most success. So make sure you've got someone accountable, make sure that there's a champion. 2 is make sure that you can see the reductions in the bills. So if the energy bill is going to someone that's not coming to a Get to Zero initiative, it's showing them that the savings that you see from the changes made did happen, and basically sharing that success with the other people on your team. Otherwise, they're going to forget about it. They're not going to be bought in. So it's celebrating those successes the very first time you see that next utility bill come in, and it's 10% less. The last piece would be, can you ingrain it into a process that you already have? And some of the best ones that we've seen are owners that basically implement it into their end of day or daily checklists. So teams have checklists that they do morning, noon, close up. If you start putting the energy behaviors in there, specifically around lighting, set points, the phantom load side of things, is where we've seen the follow through, the commitment. Basically, they're checking off that they've done it, saying that I've committed to this, and that just builds up that behavior over time. It's also, as you bring new staff in, it's already something we do. This is the way we've always done it.
Awesome. John is asking, have you ever seen a safety hierarchy image similar to the one you showed for conservation, so the safety hierarchy can be followed before proceeding to the conservation issues?
I haven't, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's where our industry has stolen it from. I know that we all love the regulatory sector and the workplace health and safety being in those regulations. I have had the conversation that goes, owners that are really focused on, okay, where am I really investing my dollars? Energy conservation is very low on the list. Many would be aware it's utility costs, it's rent, and then it's your people. When you look at the cost scale side of things, employee safety is number 1 on where you're going to spend money. And I would imagine it falls into that hierarchy when I talk with business owners of what are my priorities for this. The health and safety of my people, my customers, is basically the base of that pyramid. Yeah.
Great. And I guess final question, are you looking at how to support microgrids to support neighborhood retrofits?
I guess I would say yes and no. So Thinkwell Shift isn't actively looking at microgrid side of things. That said, we deliver a couple of community engagement initiatives that would be very similar to microgrid side of things. So where we do boots on the ground engagement, we work with pretty small municipalities. So we're talking under 1,000 customers on some of these smaller utilities. They're doing community solar initiatives, heat pump initiatives, and microgrid is basically one step that might be a few degrees different than what we already do there today. So it's not one we're actively pursuing, but I think it's one that our team would be able to do quite well.
Great. Thank you, Liam. And thank you everyone for your great questions, the Q&A. That was very interesting. So this session was recorded. So if you want to come back to it, if you'd like to share it with colleagues or friends, it will be on our website in the next week or so. And you can find this session and all of our previous discovery sessions on our website under the events tab. So in the meantime, before our next session, next Friday, you can stay connected with us by our Discovery Hub, as well as signing up for our mailing list for energy efficiency developments across the country. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. And Liam, thanks for a great presentation.
Awesome.
Happy
Thanks,
Friday.
Emily. Take care.